The Devil's Workshop. In addition to the 6 basic fears, there is another evil by which people suffer. It constitutes a rich soil in which the seeds of failure grow abundantly. It is so subtle that its presence often is not detected. It is more deeply rooted and more often fatal than all of the 6 fears. For want of a better name, let us call this evil susceptibility to negative influences. Those who accumulate great riches always protect themselves against negative influences. The poverty-stricken never do. Those who succeed in any calling must prepare their minds to resist such influences. If you are reading this book to learn how to grow rich, you should examine yourself very carefully to determine whether you are susceptible to negative influences. If you neglect this self-analysis, you will give up your right to attain the object of your desires. Make your analysis searching. As you read the following questions, be tough on yourself. Go at the task as carefully as you would if you were searching for any other enemy you knew was waiting to ambush you. You must deal with your own faults as you would with a real and serious enemy. You can easily protect yourself against real enemies because there are laws, police, and courts to deal with them. But this 7th basic evil is more difficult to master because it strikes when you are not aware of its presence, when you are asleep and while you are awake. Moreover, its weapon is intangible because it consists of merely a state of mind. Negative influences are also dangerous because they come in so many different forms. Sometimes they enter the mind through the well-meant words of your friends and relatives. At other times they come from within, through your own mental attitude. Always it is as deadly as poison, even though it may not kill as quickly. How to protect yourself against negative influences. To protect yourself against negative influences, whether of your own making or the result of negative people around you, recognize that your willpower is your defense. You must put it into constant use until it builds a wall of immunity against negative influences in your own mind. Recognize that you and every other human being are, by nature, lazy, indifferent, and susceptible to all suggestions that reinforce your weaknesses. Recognize that you are, by nature, susceptible to all of the 6 basic fears, and you must set up habits to counteract all these fears. Recognize that negative influences often work on you through your subconscious mind, and are therefore difficult to detect. Keep your mind closed against all people who depress or discourage you in any way. Clean out your medicine chest, and stop pandering to colds, aches, pains, and imaginary illness. Deliberately seek the company of people who influence you to think and act for yourself. Do not expect troubles, as they have a tendency not to disappoint. Without doubt, the most common weakness of all human beings is the habit of leaving their minds open to the negative influences of other people. This weakness is all the more damaging because most people do not even know they do it. The following list of questions is designed to help you see yourself as you really are. You should read through the list now. Then set aside a day when you can give adequate time to go through the list again and thoroughly answer each question. When you do this, I advise that you read the questions and state your answers aloud so you can hear your own voice. This will make it easier for you to be truthful with yourself. Self-analysis questions. Do you complain often of feeling bad, and if so, what is the cause? Do you find fault with other people at the slightest provocation? Do you frequently make mistakes in your work, and if so, why? Are you sarcastic and offensive in your conversation? Do you deliberately avoid the association of anyone, and if so, why? Do you suffer frequently with indigestion? If so, what is the cause? Does life seem futile and the future hopeless to you? Do you like your occupation? If not, why? Do you often feel self-pity? And if so, why? Are you envious of those who excel you? To which do you devote most time, thinking of success or of failure? Are you gaining or losing self-confidence as you grow older? Do you learn something of value from all mistakes? Are you permitting some relative or acquaintance to worry you? If so, why? Are you sometimes excited about life, and at other times in the depths of despondency? Who has the most inspiring influence upon you, and for what reason? Do you tolerate negative or discouraging influences that you could avoid? Are you careless of your personal appearance? If so, when and why? Have you learned how to ignore your troubles by being too busy to be annoyed by them? Would you call yourself a spineless weakling if you permitted others to do your thinking for you? How many preventable disturbances annoy you, and why do you tolerate them? Do you resort to alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, or other compulsions to quiet your nerves? If so, why do you not try willpower instead? Does anyone nag you, and if so, for what reason? Do you have a definite major purpose? And if so, what is it, and what plan do you have for achieving it? Do you suffer from any of the 6 basic fears? If so, which ones? Have you developed a method to shield yourself against the negative influence of others? Do you use autosuggestion to make your mind positive? Which do you value most, your material possessions or your privilege of controlling your own thoughts? Are you easily influenced by others against your own judgment? Has today added anything of value to your stock of knowledge or state of mind? Do you face squarely the circumstances that make you unhappy, or do you sidestep the responsibility? Do you analyze all mistakes and failures and try to profit by them, or do you take the attitude that this is not your duty? Can you name 3 of your most damaging weaknesses? What are you doing to correct them? Do you encourage other people to bring their worries to you for sympathy? Do you choose, from your daily experiences, lessons or influences that aid in your personal advancement? Does your presence have a negative influence on other people as a rule? What habits of other people annoy you most? Do you form your own opinions, or do you permit yourself to be influenced by other people? Have you learned how to create a mental state of mind with which you can shield yourself against all discouraging influences? Does your occupation inspire you with faith and hope? Are you conscious of possessing spiritual forces of sufficient power to enable you to keep your mind free from all forms of fear? Does your religion help to keep your mind positive? Do you feel it your duty to share other people's worries? If so, why? If you believe that birds of a feather flock together, what have you learned about yourself by studying the friends whom you attract? What connection, if any, do you see between the people with whom you associate most closely and any unhappiness you may experience? Could it be possible that some person whom you consider to be a friend is, in reality, your worst enemy because of his or her negative influence on your mind? By what rules do you judge who is helpful and who is damaging to you? Are your intimate associates mentally superior or inferior to you? How much time out of every 24 hours do you devote to your occupation, sleep, play and relaxation, acquiring useful knowledge, plain wasted time? Who among your acquaintances encourages you most, cautions you most, discourages you most? What is your greatest worry? Why do you tolerate it? When others offer you free, unsolicited advice, do you accept it without question, or do you analyze their motive? What, above all else, do you most desire? Do you intend to acquire it? Are you willing to subordinate all other desires for this one? How much time daily do you devote to acquiring it? Do you change your mind often? If so, why? Do you usually finish everything you begin? Are you easily impressed by other people's business or professional titles, college degrees, or wealth? Are you easily influenced by what other people think or say about you? Do you cater to people because of their social or financial status? Whom do you believe to be the greatest person living? In what respect is this person superior to yourself? How much time have you devoted to studying and answering these questions? At least one day is necessary for the analysis and the answering of the entire list. If you have answered all these questions truthfully, you know more about yourself than the majority of people. Study the questions carefully. Come back to them once each week for several months, and be astounded at the amount of additional knowledge of great value to yourself you will have gained by the simple method of answering the questions truthfully. If you are not certain about the answers to some of the questions, seek the counsel of those who know you well, especially those who have no motive in flattering you, and see yourself through their eyes. The experience will be astonishing. The one thing over which you have absolute control. You have absolute control over only one thing, and that is your thoughts. This is the most significant and inspiring of all facts known to humans. It reflects our divine nature. This ability to control your thoughts is the sole means by which you may control your own destiny. If you fail to control your own mind, you may be sure you will control nothing else. Your mind is your spiritual estate. Protect and use it with the care to which divine royalty is entitled. You were given your willpower for this purpose. Unfortunately, there is no legal protection against those who, by design or through ignorance, poison the minds of others with negative suggestion. Those with negative minds tried to convince Thomas A. Edison that he could not build a machine that would record and reproduce the human voice, because, they said, no one else has ever produced such a machine. Edison did not believe them. He knew that the mind could produce anything the mind could conceive and believe. That knowledge was the thing that lifted the great Edison above the common herd. Men with negative minds told F.W. Woolworth he would go broke trying to run a store on 5 and 10 cent sales. He did not believe them. He knew that he could do anything within reason if he backed his plans with faith. Exercising his right to keep the negative suggestions of others out of his mind, he piled up a fortune of more than $100 million. Doubting Thomas's scoffed scornfully when Henry Ford tried out his first crudely built automobile on the streets of Detroit. Some said the thing would never become practical. Others said no one would pay money for such a contraption. Ford said, "I'll belt the earth with dependable motor cars." And he did. For the benefit of those seeking vast riches, let it be remembered that practically the sole difference between Henry Ford and a majority of workers is this: Ford had a mind, and he controlled it. The others have minds that they do not try to control. Mind control is the result of self-discipline and habit. You either control your mind, or it controls you. There is no halfway compromise. The most practical method for controlling your mind is the habit of keeping it busy with a definite purpose, backed by a definite plan. Study the records of those who achieve noteworthy success, and you will see that they have control over their own minds, and that they exercise that control and direct it toward the attainment of definite objectives. Without this control, success is not possible. 55 Famous Alibis by Old Man If. People who do not succeed have one distinguishing trait in common. They know all the reasons for failure and have what they believe to be airtight alibis to explain away their own lack of achievement. Some of these alibis are clever, and a few of them are justifiable by the facts. But alibis cannot be used for money. The world wants to know only one thing. Have you achieved success? A character analyst compiled a list of the most commonly used alibis. As you read the list, examine yourself carefully and determine how many of these alibis you use. Remember, the philosophy presented in this book makes every one of these alibis obsolete. If I didn't have a wife and family. If I had enough pull. If I had money. If I had a good education. If I could get a job. If I had good health. If I only had time. If times were better. If other people understood me. If conditions around me were only different. If I could live my life over again. If I did not fear what they would say. If I had been given a chance. If I now had a chance. If other people didn't have it in for me. If nothing happens to stop me. If only I were younger. If I only could do what I want. If I had been born rich. If I could meet the right people. If I had the talent that some people have. If I dared to assert myself. If only I had embraced past opportunities. If people didn't get on my nerves. If I didn't have to keep house and look after the children. If I could save some money. If the boss only appreciated me. If I only had somebody to help me. If my family understood me. If I lived in a big city. If I could just get started. If I were only free. If I had the personality of some people. If I were not so fat. If my real talents were known. If I could just get a break. If I could only get out of debt. If I hadn't failed. If I only knew how. If everybody wasn't against me. If I didn't have so many worries. If I could marry the right person. If people weren't so dumb. If my family were not so extravagant. If I were sure of myself. If luck were not against me. If I had not been born under the wrong star. If it were not true that what is to be will be. If I did not have to work so hard. If I hadn't lost my money. If I lived in a different neighborhood. If I didn't have a past. If I only had a business of my own. If other people would only listen to me. If, and this is the greatest of them all, if I had the courage to see myself as I really am, I would find out what is wrong with me and correct it. And I know that something must be wrong with the way I have done things, or I would already have the success that I desire. I recognize that something must be wrong with me, otherwise I would have spent more time analyzing my weaknesses and less time building alibis to cover them. Building alibis to explain away failure is a national pastime. The habit is as old as the human race and is fatal to success. Why do people cling to their pet alibis? The answer is obvious. They defend their alibis because they create them. Your alibi is the child of your own imagination. It is human nature to defend your own brainchild. Building alibis is a deeply rooted habit. Habits are difficult to break, especially when they provide justification for something we do. Plato had this truth in mind when he said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self. To be conquered by self is, of all things, the most shameful and vile. Another philosopher had the same thought in mind when he said, "It was a great surprise to me when I discovered that most of the ugliness I saw in others was but a reflection of my own nature." Elbert Hubbard, philosopher, author, publisher of the Fra magazine, and founder of the Roycrofters community of artists, said, "It has always been a mystery to me why people spend so much time deliberately fooling themselves by creating alibis to cover their weaknesses. If used differently, this same time would be sufficient to cure the weakness. Then no alibis would be needed." In parting, I would remind you that life is a checkerboard, and the player opposite you is time. If you hesitate before moving, or neglect to move promptly, your men will be wiped off the board by time. You are playing against a partner who will not tolerate indecision. Previously, you may have had a logical excuse for not having forced life to come through with whatever you asked. That alibi is now obsolete, because you are in possession of the master key that unlocks the door to life's riches. The master key is intangible, but it is powerful. It is the privilege of creating, in your own mind, a burning desire for a definite form of riches. There is no penalty for the use of this key, but there is a price you must pay if you do not use it. The price is failure. There is a reward of stupendous proportions if you put the key to use. It is the satisfaction that will come to you when you conquer self and force life to pay whatever is asked. The reward is worthy of your effort. Will you make the start and be convinced? "If we are related," said the immortal Emerson, "we shall meet." In closing, may I borrow his thought and say, if we are related, we have, through these pages, met. Remember that your real wealth can be measured not by what you have, but by what you are.